Um, Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Just Conversations, episode 21. It's been a long time coming. This time around, I'm talking to Tabitha Lean, and I'll just hand it over to Tabitha now just to give us a little spiel on who she is and what she does. Over to
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me on your show. My name's Tabitha Lean. I'm a First Nations woman, but I'm calling in today from Ghana country. This is not my country. So just quickly acknowledge the lands that I'm zooming in from today as the Ghana land and acknowledge the elders who have caretaken this country since the very first sunrise. I am a formerly incarcerated woman. I did 2 years in prison here in Adelaide and almost 3 years on home detention and just over 2 years on parole. I've been sort of free of that system, if you could really say free, because we're never really free once we've been criminalised for almost 12 months now. So I'm now getting to really understand what those collateral consequences of incarceration are, because you kind of, when you're in the system, you just look for that freedom day and then you finally have those shackles removed from you and you think, far out, man, I'm really not free. So, and I'm a mother of three kids and I'm also a writer. So I spend a lot of my time writing about abolition and what freedom from incarceration looks like and feels like and could look like.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that,
That's
Tabitha.
me.
I'll just acknowledge that I'm on unceded land, and I pay my respects by acknowledging that the resilience, the resourcefulness, and the humour and the friendship that I get from all First Nations people. So thanks for that as well. Um, yeah, so just touching on that, the freedom. I often say to people there's a vast difference between freedom and free doom. So this idea that we're going to get out and everything's going to be
Mm.
great. Like I'm 22 years out now, and still crave a 3:30 lock-in some days when the kids are a bit, man, I want to get locked away. So where is, you're a year away sort of scenario, what's still hard to wash off for you at the moment?
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. I like to describe the prison system as like a video game. So it's like when you're in it, you think if I could just get to that next stage, if I just defeat this beast right here and get to that next stage, it's going to get better. So, like when I was locked up, I was like, all right, if I could just get out on home D, because in South Australia, you can get home D release. If I could just get out on home D, it's going to be great. And then I finally got home D release. And I
Sorry.
realized there's just another monster in that video game to defeat. And so then I'm in the home D space and I'm like, far out, man, I just defeat this beast and I get out on parole. It's going to be great. And no, I got out on parole and then there's just another monster on parole. And then you think, God, I've just got to get off parole and everything's going to be good. But no, then you're just a formerly incarcerated person living in this so-called free world with all these problems that abound. So it's this never-ending video game where there is no freedom for people. So I've always known this from a theoretical perspective, right? Aboriginal people in this country are not free. Australia is not a free world for Black people on their own country. But when you are embodying this kind of incarceration to a system, it's this really discombobulating experience. So now I live with these collateral consequences of imprisonment where, for example, you can't get insurance
Yeah.
on your car. You can't, I can't get a working with children check to save my life,
Yeah.
and, you can't even get a job as a cleaner because you require a police check for that. So, uh, ability to participate in the economy is so restricted, yet we're told to become productive citizens, to give back to society, but we are not able to. For me, I'm a practicing artist. And so I can't even go into a school and say run a weaving project with children because I have a prohibition order on me because I can't get a working with children check, which is absolutely insane because I am not a harm to children. In fact, my criminogenic risk factors would indicate that I am not. However, because of state regulations around working with children check, the fact that I have consistently not admitted guilt to my crime, I am seen as someone who cannot be redeemed. I am someone who cannot be rehabilitated. So, you know, there's all these sort of dilemmas that happen for the criminalised body in giving us these life sentences. So we don't have the death penalty in Australia, except if you're Black and you are killed in custody. But what we do have is a form of civil death where we are, you know, stopped from moving forward. We're stopped from continuing with our lives. We are just sort of, yeah, we have this kind of quasi existence where, you know, we're kind of forced into spaces where we have to create our own industries, or you know, we have these where we kind of like end up responding to surveys run by criminologists for a $30 gift card so we can put food on the dinner table that night, despite having written an article a year before saying, please don't pay me gift cards. And then you're signing up for one because you're desperate for food.
Yeah. And I think
it's this really weird thing, right?
it's insane. Like I'm laughing because I relate, and it's not funny at all. But I refer to it as a perpetual punishment. I was 12 years out of prison, I'd had a successful real estate career and decided to transfer into the community services sector, and I got discriminated against as a result of my criminal record. I took corrective services to the Human Rights Commission because they discriminated against me. I had a decision made in my favor that they discriminated against me. And it's these perpetual punishments. It's like, where's the truth? People are like, oh, we need truth in sentencing. It's like, truth in sentencing. Yeah, I finished my sentence successfully 22 years ago. Why am I still facing barriers and hurdles? And today it's not as out and out blatant, but for argument's sake, if we we're both going for the same job and you didn't have a record, and then they get to HR and it's like, we just don't know how to mitigate the risk with this guy to get him past the insurances and all of those things that you've sort of spoken about. And it's like, why do we need to keep punishing people? Yeah, the punitive approach, I think we both agree, just is not helpful or beneficial for anybody.
But the really interesting thing for me as an abolitionist is I come up against all the time, well, we can't get rid of prisons, we can't get rid of prisons. But the interesting thing is when people consistently lock us out of labour markets, the economy and the housing markets, all of those markets that we're locked out of, right, and they perpetually punish us, is interestingly, they are creating the abolition arguments for us because they are demonstrating that even they don't believe in their own institutions of exile, containment, and punishment as rehabilitative places, because even they're saying that you, after serving your enormous sentence and all those years past your sentence, that you are not rehabilitated enough to be afforded a space in the labour market.
That was the exact argument. So to me, I say to corrective services when I fought them. That was the exact argument. I was like, it says on your website that that's your job to I said, I've rehabilitated and reintegrated. So yeah, they had to change all of their policies, practices, and procedures around employing people with a record. So yeah, they provide us with the argument essentially.
And that's how we know that it's not about that. You know, that's how we know that prisons, policing, caging people is not about, it's not about safety for all. It's about containing certain populations. It's about creating disposable humans within a racial capitalist state. Like you and I are now disposable. Like it doesn't matter what is done onto us, because the reality is the violences that are perpetuated upon us now, even still this amount of time after release, is done to keep people like the other people safe from people like us. So people don't, when I go out and I talk to groups, or if I go visit community groups and I talk about the things that happened to me post-release, they're like, what?
Yeah.
What? They're like this, like really shocked, like, oh, a nice lady like you. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? This is happening in your name. You actually have the opportunity to stand up and say, no more. I will not stand by and allow these violences to happen to these people in my name, because that's the reality of why it's happening. But the thing is that people actually don't mind because it's being kept at arm's length. It's
Yeah.
happening behind closed doors because people like yourself and I and other criminalized people is we're living on the margins of society. Most of us are living in kind of poverty, or if it's not complete poverty, we're kind of living day to day, week to week.
Mm.
We're not kind of living lives where we have money in the bank and where we can kind of like plan for our future. We're kind of living paycheck to paycheck if we've got one, or living Centrelink check to Centrelink check. So we're living on the margins because we're not actually able to participate fully in society. And the system makes it so because they need to. So what it means for the rest of the community is they don't see what's happening to us because we're the invisible, disposable humans and we remain that way forever. It
Yeah.
suits the system. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this really weird thing.
Because that's essentially what happened to me. I become sort of unemployable. And when you're unemployable and you've got a family of three and you've got to put food on the table and all that sort of stuff, I was like, I know how to make money criminally. Like I know how to make money. I know how to do that. But and when you exclude me from participating in your society, you create this black market that I have to leverage, which which I had to do for like 6 months at about 15 years out of prison because I could not get a job to save my life. And my ex-wife, she's like, you need to go and earn some money. I was like, I've applied for like 50 jobs this week and nobody's employing. So these are like when they create these environments, it creates an environment where it's easier or not easier, but I know how to behave in a criminogenic way, for want of a better fucking term. So I know how to do that and make money if you're not going to allow me to participate in your society freely.
Correct. And that's why we call it recriminalization, not recidivism.
Yeah,
Recidivism.
yeah,
Because the system is actively recriminalizing you because it is forcing you into a position where you must make a choice to commit another so-called crime
yeah,
in order to survive. So these are survival offenses because you have no choice, because not all choices are made equal. So people are like, oh, Dean, you made a choice to do that. But actually, did you actually have a choice?
yeah,
Because these are survival offenses. When it comes to letting your children not eat or keeping a roof over their head, when the system is locking you out of every market, you do what you need to survive,
yeah,
and you're
yeah.
surviving in a
So
colony that is hell bent on destroying people. Like, and this is the reality of it. And until we confront that, until
yeah,
we have enough people's eyes wide open, this is what's going to happen for people.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a violent system that must perpetuate itself in order to survive. So it will
Yeah,
keep gobbling up people like us. It will keep people like us within its system. But worse, it'll keep sucking in other people as well. That's why they have to expand prison beds. It's
yeah.
because once they've got people like us in their crosshairs, they keep us. But then they have to increase bed numbers because they just keep pulling in more and more and more.
And
Like
the only thing that's ever
it's just
been,
like crazy to me that people don't see it. Like,
yeah.
or if they see it, they willfully ignore it.
Well, the only thing that's been guaranteed from building a prison is the need to build another one.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Correct.
you touched on before how we need to create spaces where we can work and carve out those little niches of like lived experience. And at the moment, I'm sort of around that lived experience. I'm a bit over it.
Mm-hmm.
I have an inherent understanding of how government practices and policies impact myself and the people I work with. And I put that to some academics the other day, and they're like, "Oh, why aren't you using the lived experience?" It's like, because that's yours. You told me I had lived experience. I have an inherent understanding, and I've done a fellowship, and I traveled to the Netherlands, and they call it their terminology translated is expert by experience. So that's how. But and what I sort of say in those spaces is now. There's a difference between an inherent understanding. That person, I would suggest, has the capacity, has done some little bit of training and education, and is aware and understands how to articulate and educate people on the issues. Then there's lived experience. That's people that have had an experience. They're not experiencing it anymore, but they can sort of talk about their experience. There's living experience where people are still living in that. Then you get down to peer workers. So these are like language being really important to myself. How do we get this language out there to be palatable for others? Like, and I know you're at the forefront of that as well, but like, how do you see your labels and your titles in this space?
Yeah, it's a really important conversation that we need to be having at the moment. I think the term lived experience is being overused right now because I'm seeing a lot of criminalized people being chosen by the state, the
Groomed.
palatable criminalized people being chosen by the state to represent our voices as contributing to policy decisions or legislation consultations or program design, who I do not feel represent me or the people within my community of criminalized people effectively. Now, that could be for a few reasons. One, they're palatable because they might be reformists and I'm an abolitionist. So we have vastly different views on what we think liberation from the system looks like. Second, they might have been at prison 30, 40 years ago, and they may never have stepped back inside a prison again to visit anyone, to visit with the people currently inside. So their experience of prison is not contemporaneous because prison is an ever-evolving beast. The issues that people are facing in prison right now are very different even to the experience that I had in prison 4 years ago.
20 years ago, I don't even
Thirdly,
consider myself an expert in that space anymore, if you will. Mainly,
correct.
I still communicate with people and work with people in the space, but I'm not an expert in that because I'm not living it at the moment.
Mm. And then the third point I would make is that the people who are speaking on behalf of the criminalised community must be accountable back to the criminalised community. And that's the critical thing for me. If you are speaking on behalf of a community, you must be accountable to the community you're speaking on behalf of. And that includes feeding back to that community, consulting with that community, and being held accountable by that community, whether that be positively or through critique.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm seeing right now. And so it really concerns me because, you know, like this is a new kind of space. There's money available in this space. So like no one cared about criminalized people before, but all of a sudden there's a bit of money around about it. So all of a sudden it's like a hot thing. Like, oh yeah, like we'll get involved here, you know, and it's like, organisation, like you think of, say, when Debbie Kilroy started Sisters Inside more than 30 years ago, no one cared about women in prison. Now, all of a sudden, it's kind of sexy to care about women in prison. So people are popping up, rehashing things that people like Deb had pioneered 30 years ago, talking about strip searching in prison being sexual assault by the state. And people are now coming out with that as if it's revolutionary thinking. Now, I'm glad they're coming on board, but what we do have to do is honour the work of the criminalized people that have come before us. And rather than erase it, we have to acknowledge that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Yeah. And I'm just using that as an example. There's plenty of other people that have come before us that have done that work. And so some of those things concern me, but also the fact that we're not, you know, a lot of people are not that are speaking on our behalf just do not represent us. So I'm interested in how do we address this within our community, and how do we as a community come together to talk about what might this look like for us, and whether there's a forum for us to actually have this conversation frankly and honestly and with some accountability to each other in a kind and caring way that does not uphold the principles of the prison through punishment, shame, and exiling certain groups, but in a way that we can discuss with each other how might this look. How might we communicate with each other, or how might we call in each other when we feel that we're overstepping the boundaries, or hold on, that doesn't, this, what you're saying to the government here, say on this policy, doesn't really represent it. Or say, for example, you're a guy who's been to prison, so you don't know what it means to be a woman in a shower block with a male prisoner looking at you. So why are you commenting on this? Or, vice versa,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
those sorts of things.
Yeah, so
So
true.
yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And like you said, fraught in terms of even the language we're using to describe it. And I really like that expert by experience. And I also think about that concept of the term lived experience, and from an Aboriginal perspective where time is not linear,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
idea that lived experience is in the past. And yeah, it's just a, yeah, because you can have a lived experience of anything, right? So
Yeah,
like you and I have
exactly.
this lived experience of have a conversation today, but that doesn't mean that you know what I might want to have a conversation of tomorrow just because we've had one conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was at a conference not too long earlier this year, and there was a lived experience space where there was a lot of juniors in the space, and someone wanted to construct and got up and spoke about how we needed to talk and the way we needed to talk and the way we needed to carry ourselves. And I was just like, I had to walk out because I was just like, I don't, like, this is just wrong. Like, don't. And this was another lived experience person talking about this, so it was a bit. But I have a very good friend, Glenn Martin, who is founder of the Closed Rikers prison campaign. And we have the saying, may we never agree. Like, may he and I never agree. We respectfully disagree. There's a lot of commonality in what we do agree on. Like, there's a lot. However, there are nuances and ways that he goes about things and ways that I go. Because I'm a white man, the world was built and designed for me as we know it today, essentially. So I have no idea what it's like to be a black man in America. No idea. So I don't talk on those topics, but I will echo his voice at times. So that's what for me it's about. It's about echoing other people's voices instead of saying, oh, I spoke to Tabitha and this is what she said. It's like, well, no, I'll just echo your voice and I'll put that out there. And if someone wants to know about women in prison, I'll go, oh, you need to speak to Tabitha or you need to speak to Debbie. Someone wants to know about what it's like to be an African man or a Black American in prison, go and talk to Glenn. Like, these are things that I'll just refer on, not go, oh, yeah, I know this guy and this
Mm,
is what happens and this is how it is. It's like understanding how we can echo each other's voices over and above sort of reverberate.
mm. Yeah, that's a really important thing. So what I'm hearing you describe is like being more focused on building community than a platform. And if we had more people interested in community than platforms, we'd be doing a better. But you know what? Like, even though I say that, and to be honest with you, I do rage a lot. Like when I see people more focused on their platform than community, I also feel like that's a product of the prison, because the prison does lock us into cycles of poverty. So when I see a criminalized person more worried about their platform than they are about our community or the safety of our community or the well-being of our community, I also have a sense of sadness, because I think that they're exploiting our community because they are locked into this cycle of poverty. So they're desperate to get out of it. So I also see that as a product of what the prison has done to them. So I also do have some empathy despite my rage.
Yeah, same.
So
I totally relate
yeah,
to
but
that. Totally relate.
yeah, because I also, but like the other day, I was reading a report, and the report was done by an organization, and they were banging on about how it is so important to consult with criminalized people. And like criminalized people are left out of this argument. I was like, yeah, they've listened to us. And then I read the report, and they'd like consulted with 13 people in prison. I was like, what? Like, they're making this big thing about, criminalized people are left out of the conversation. And like, I went to look at how many people they'd spoken. It was like 13 people in prison. And I was like, what? And that stuff bothers me.
Yeah.
That stuff really bothers me.
In
So
what way?
even it's that, because, like, we have hundreds of people in prison, thousands of
Yeah.
people in prison.
Yeah.
You can't be gammon. You can't be banging on and making your money, because these organizations get a shit ton of money, Dean, off our backs.
Yeah.
Like off the backs of our incarceration, off the backs of our trauma, off the backs of women being raped in prison, off the backs of men being violated, off the backs of our detachment from our children. the money they're making to produce these glossy reports that sits on shelves that just echo what we have said for years.
Yeah.
And then they have the cheek to reiterate what we've said, which is hear our voices, consult with us on these matters. And we think, oh, yeah, great. I'm reading them, go, good, good, good. And then I look at their actual data and I go, because they're saying things like 40% of women said this. I'm thinking, great. And then I actually break it down because, I've been to uni too. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got 2 postgrad degrees. I can do that. And I'm like, 13 women you spoke to? 13 women. Like,
yeah.
what? And it's insulting. And so
13
when I also think,
implicit groomed women that said what they
correct,
generally.
and yeah, and then I'm like, when I think of the lived experience community, I then think how many of us would have been better placed to undertake that work? How
Yeah,
many of us have skills and need the work and could have been better placed because there are some of us going into prisons regularly. Many of us, like yourself, myself, and a dozen other people I can think of, are capable to go in there and drum up relationships with those people so much faster because we know the rules of the street, we know the rules of the cage. And
yeah.
we could have gone in there, and if that's what the government wanted, a glossy report, I can tell you our report would have been kick ass. And we would have
Yeah,
spoken to more than 13 people. Because for me, the priority always is centering the voices of people who've seen the inside of a cage, not people who might have proximity to criminalisation, not people whose brother, sister, auntie, or cousin have been to prison, but people who have actually laid on a wafer thin mattress at night, looking at the cracked ceiling with the paint peeling off and yearned for home. They're the people that I care about. They're the people I want to liberate. And they're the people I want to read their work. They're the
yeah.
people who I want to advise in government, not
And
these other people
that's
making their bangs for bucks.
that's what I often say to people is like, what if you want to do that, what they'll do is they'll will out the most complicit and compliant people that you can
Correct.
get. You'll get access to that. It'll be somewhat of a lived experience, but what I can do is I can go in and I can get the guy at the back that's running a book, that's running the like cell, like the block or whatever it is. I can get his information and everyone in that spectrum because you're not getting clean data. Like that's what I say to like academics now. I said the thing about what you're doing at the moment, it's not clean data.
Correct. Yeah.
Not clean data.
And it
So
hasn't been for years, right?
no,
Because
it hasn't. And
academics dominate that
they're
space.
creating programs off the back of it.
Correct.
And look,
Correct.
you
But
know why the
we could
programs
smell the
aren't working?
bullshit.
You know why the programs aren't working? Because you're not getting good, clean data.
Yeah. And those programs are being designed and delivered by people who haven't been to prison. And
Yeah.
we can smell bullshit at 100 miles.
Yeah.
So, like, when I read interviews and I'm like, the fuck? Like, this isn't true. This won't run.
Yeah.
But if we'd been in there and we'd heard it, if a prisoner had said that stuff to us, we would have known straight up, like, is it because the officer's standing right outside the
Yeah.
interview room right now that
Well,
you're saying this?
that's
Or is it
exactly
because,
right.
yeah, you're the palatable one? Or you're the one that's providing, information to Intel and they just dropped you in here
Yeah.
because they want you to say, look, we smell bullshit.
Yeah.
That's why we're best placed to do this work. But yeah, I mean, it's an uphill battle, right? Because academia, they valorize the knowledge of the palatable people. And yeah, it's just another place that we're excluded. It's just another bit of violence. And that's why the knowledge industry is complicit in the prison industrial complex. They're just part of it. And that's why we've got to abolish the whole lot, Dean, burn the whole place to the fucking ground. See, now
Yes.
they're the things that don't forget me saying things like that. That's the stuff that gets me in trouble. So we'll put a little disclaimer here. I was not inciting arson. It's a metaphorical
No.
concept.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought now.
Get me all riled up now.
So, of course, our time's getting close to the end.
Yep.
And are there any transferable skills that you were able to bring out of prison and the like, you know, not that prison's rehabilitative or anyway, but what are things that you've been able to like, resourceful resilience, blah, 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 because that's what I see in this cohort. And that's what the community screams out for in employment and all this sort of stuff. It's like, what's something that's transferable that you've brought from prison to your life today?
Rage,
Yeah, okay.
rage.
Which
So I
was,
spent the first 10 months in prison really sad, like being pulled away from my kids, I
yeah,
couldn't
fuck.
cope with. First 10 months, I barely looked up from the ground. And then when I finally looked up and looked around and saw so many people that were like when I started to realize what this system really was, I just got so angry, so fucking filled with rage. You know, every time they pull us Aboriginal girls out of our cells and make us line up at the front and show them our fists to prove we hadn't been fighting if there'd been a big fight. And while the white girls watched on, every time I watched and saw things like that, the rage just built up in me like big fucking hard bubble in my stomach. That anger just grew and grew and grew. And it grew to the point of productivity for me. And so the day I walked out of those
Yeah,
gates, I turned and looked back, not for the sake of nostalgia, but to look back and say, I will be back to that fucking officer that told me I'd be back. But not back to be held and contained by them, but I'd be back to tear down every fucking brick and bar until every one of my people was freed from that place.
yeah,
And ever since then, I have kept that campfire burning in the base of my belly. So
yeah,
every bit of rage, because to me, I don't want to be resilient
yeah,
because I don't think that place builds resilience. What I think that place does is light a fire. Because if we let that place give us resilience, they can take that resilience from us because we never should have been forced into a position to be violated, to be resilient from.
mhm,
Because I think that place tries to break us, but we are entirely whole. Like I hear women say that they were broken and they had to rebuild themselves. And I say we were never broken, we were always whole. This system tries to convince us we are broken, but we are fully formed whole people. And what we have to do is use every bit of rage and anger at what the state has done to us every time there's violators, every time they've stripped us, every time they've urine tested us, every time they've told us we were nothing or we were good for nothing or that we would be back. And you take every bit of that rage and you use it to either propel yourself forward to succeed in life in spite of them, or you use it to break down the walls, or you use it to create a new life, not for them, but in spite of them. You use it so that you never give power to that state. Because if we say they've given us anything, we owe them something. If we say they've given us anything, it means they've had some power. If we say they've given us anything, it means that they've done something to us. So for me, I just think, no, every night, like, I just would sweep up the ashes of myself and fucking put more on my fire and build that fucking rage. And every day I use it. And people sometimes say, oh, you're angry, Tabitha. Fucking oath, I'm angry. And I always think, what I do is then turn around and say, why the fuck aren't you? Because
yeah.
I think if people are not angry, they're not paying attention. Because right now, the world's on fire, right? I mean, we've got Palestinian
Oh,
people
yeah.
collecting their children's body parts in plastic bags.
I
If
can't even
people aren't
comprehend that.
angry about that, they're not fucking paying attention.
Yeah,
We've got, sacred sites along this country being desecrated. We've got, sacred trees that have been here since the first sunrise, like since the creator put them here, being chopped down, and people aren't angry. We've got
they're
female
still
prisoners in
removing
Darwin sleeping
Aboriginal
on
children
mattresses on the
at a
floor.
greater rate than ever before.
Correct.
Like
I
I
mean,
can't
in
like that.
Queensland, they're about to, yeah,
I can't even
in
like
Queensland,
I
they're
don't even
about to
need to go
pass
overseas to get
legislation.
rage. Like I don't even need to
No,
get out of
that's
this
what I
country
mean.
to be
Well,
full of
Dean,
fucking
they're
rage.
about to pass legislation in Queensland that a
I
child as young as 10 could be locked up for 20 years.
I got Dylan's
Like,
shirt on today.
if, yeah, I mean, if you're not angry and not paying attention, there are people in Alice Springs right now sitting in remand cells where the lights are kept on 24/7. I mean, they are the conditions of torture. Australia is routinely breaching the human rights of people and they are knowingly doing it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm fucking angry. And do you know what? I'm cool with that because anger is good.
And
And I want everyone else to get angry.
I I
Yeah.
I hear that that's angry, but I see it as passion in you, Tabitha.
Yeah.
So I
Nah.
get that. So I love your passion. I love, I do. I really love your passion and how passionate you are about it. I get the sense, I don't know you that well or well enough, but I get the sense that you live what you do. which aligns quite well with like the amount of money that I've walked away from, the amount of people I've upset because I've said, no, that's not fucking right. I don't care how much you're going to give me. Fuck off. In this space, in this lived experience space, division is the enemy. They will try to divide us, separate us. And when we're arguing amongst each other, they are winning. Um, really mindful of the time coming to an end. We've got a couple of minutes. What is coming up 2025 for you? Anything that anyone can support? I really wanted to touch on how you put bank details up and you get them to pay like as a service. You know, there's a young woman that needs something, something, something. Can you directly donate to that? Not sort of a big like, hey, give us all your money and we'll disperse it. It's like I really wanted to touch on that. We've run out of time, but yes, there's a minute
Yeah.
left. What are you doing next year? Please give it to us quickly.
Lots of really quick things. So yeah, there's lots of mutual aid things people can contribute to. It's a really important part of abolition is how we care for each other in spite of the state.
I'll
So,
put links up
that's
for
what mutual
everybody as
aid.
well. Sorry. So
Yeah,
I'll put
so
all the links
you
up.
could follow the national network of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and girls. We're always looking at how we can be more freedom focused and liberate women and girls from the prison system and end the criminalisation of women and girls. So we're on all socials and we go into prisons right across this country and visit women and hear what the issues are facing people right here and right now. And we're regularly reporting Australia to the to the UN. I've never contacted the UN so much in my entire life, but keep an eye on that because we are fighting on multiple fronts consistently. So probably in this less than a minute, that's probably what you can get on board and follow us with that. So
We could talk for hours about this.
Awesome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully we get to talk again soon. Have a safe and happy holiday season and we'll talk soon. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dean. Take care.
Bye.